Picture this: 334 BC, the plains near the Granicus River in western Anatolia. Alexander the Great's Macedonian phalanx crashes into Persian forces defending the ancient heartland of a kingdom most Greeks had never heard of, Arzawa. As Persian blood soaked into soil that had witnessed 3,000 years of civilization, few warriors realized they were fighting over the ruins of one of the Bronze Age's most powerful kingdoms. A kingdom that had corresponded with Egyptian pharaohs, challenged the mighty Hittite Empire, and controlled trade routes connecting 3 continents. But how did this once great power vanish so completely that even its name would be forgotten for millennia? To understand Arzawa's tragic disappearance, we must journey back to 2300 BC, when the first Proto-Arzawan communities emerged in western Anatolia's windswept highlands. The fertile river valleys cutting through the Anatolian plateau, particularly the Meander and Hermus systems, attracted humanity's earliest Bronze Age settlers. Archaeological excavations at Beit Sultan reveal sophisticated communities constructing multi-room stone houses with central hearths, advanced metalworking facilities, and storage areas suggesting both domestic life and craft production occurred within the same spaces. These weren't primitive villages. Beit Sultan's Level 13 shows remarkable architectural continuity with standardized building techniques indicating centralized authority even in these formative centuries. The material culture reveals a population increasingly distinct from contemporaries in central and eastern Anatolia. Pottery assemblages display unique geometric patterns and stylized animal forms that would later appear in classical Arzawan artistic traditions. More significantly, metallurgical evidence points to sophisticated bronze-working capabilities, specialized tools, weapons, ornamental objects demonstrating both technical skill and access to tin sources through long-distance trade networks extending into the Taurus Mountains and beyond. Linguistic evidence, though fragmentary for this early period, suggests gradual development of what scholars now recognize as the Luwian language family. Hieroglyphic inscriptions from later periods combined with comparative analysis indicate Proto-Luwian speakers who became the Arzawans began differentiating their speech patterns from other Indo-European groups during the late 3rd millennium BC. This linguistic evolution paralleled broader cultural changes as communities developed distinct religious practices, social hierarchies, and political structures, setting them apart from neighboring populations. The emergence of recognizable Arzawan identity accelerated during the early 2nd millennium BC, driven by increasing contact with Mesopotamian civilizations and resulting cultural synthesis. Cuneiform tablets from Kanesh and other Assyrian merchant colonies in Cappadocia reference Western Anatolian communities engaged in trade relationships extending far beyond simple commodity exchange. Documents dating primarily to the 19th–18th centuries BC describe complex commercial arrangements involving textiles, metals, and luxury goods requiring sophisticated administrative systems and diplomatic protocols. Sites like Carioglan show expanded fortification systems, larger public buildings, and increased craft specialization suggesting growing political centralization and social stratification. Pottery traditions evolved, incorporating new forms and decorative techniques reflecting both local innovation and foreign influence. Particularly notable, wheel-made ceramics and new firing techniques producing higher quality vessels suitable for daily use and ceremonial purposes. The Proto-Luwian communities occupied a crucial geographical position, naturally positioning them as intermediaries between established Mesopotamian civilizations and emerging Aegean cultures. River valleys provided natural corridors for trade and communication, while mineral resources, particularly silver deposits in the Taurus foothills, attracted merchants from distant lands. This geographic advantage fostered commercial networks that would become fundamental to Arzawan prosperity and political influence. Evidence comes from multiple sources. Mesopotamian cylinder seals found at Anatolian sites demonstrate direct Babylonian and Assyrian merchant contact, while Anatolian goods in Mesopotamian contexts confirm reciprocal exchange. Chemical analysis of bronze artifacts reveals tin sources accessible only through extensive trade networks, suggesting Proto-Arzawan communities already participated in complex commercial systems connecting the ancient Near East. But political consolidation was just beginning. Cultural exchanges facilitated by these trade relationships profoundly influenced Arzawan development. Mesopotamian religious concepts, particularly those related to storm deities and fertility goddesses, were adapted and integrated into local belief systems. Archaeological evidence from sanctuary sites shows adoption of certain Mesopotamian ritual practices, including libation ceremonies and votive offerings, though modified to suit local traditions. Similarly, administrative techniques, including early record-keeping and bureaucratic organization, show clear Mesopotamian influence while retaining distinctly Anatolian characteristics. The gradual formation of political structures capable of unifying scattered Proto-Arzawan communities represents one of this period's most significant developments. By 1800 BC, several regional centers had emerged as dominant settlements, each controlling surrounding territories. These proto-urban centers show evidence of specialized administrative buildings, defensive fortifications, and craft quarters, indicating complex social organization and centralized authority. The consolidation process appears gradual and largely peaceful, driven more by economic necessity and mutual benefit than military conquest. Shared cultural traditions, linguistic similarities, and common commercial interests created natural bonds between communities, facilitating political cooperation. Evidence comes from similar artifact types distributed across multiple sites, suggesting coordinated production and exchange systems requiring political agreements. Religious practices show both continuity with earlier Anatolian traditions and innovation driven by foreign contact. Excavated sanctuaries reveal complex ritual deposits, animal bones, pottery vessels, metal objects suggesting elaborate ceremonies. Consistent appearance of certain symbolic motifs across different sites indicates shared religious concepts and possibly coordinated religious activities. Particularly significant, evidence for storm god worship, which would later become central to Arzawan royal ideology and state religion. Craft specialization laid important foundations for later achievements. Archaeological evidence reveals increasing sophistication in metalworking, textile production, and ceramic manufacture. Specialized workshops have been identified complete with tools, raw materials, and finished products, demonstrating both technical skill and organized production systems. Quality and standardization suggest not only local consumption, but production for trade and export. Textile production appears highly developed with evidence for wool and linen processing. Spindle whorls, loom weights, and textile tools found at multiple sites indicate widespread cloth production, while chemical analysis of preserved textile fragments reveals sophisticated dyeing techniques using local and imported materials. This textile industry would become one of Arzawa's most important economic assets and diplomatic tools. Social structures show increasing complexity and stratification. Burial evidence reveals clear distinctions between social groups, with elite graves containing imported goods, specialized weapons, and elaborate ornaments demonstrating wealth and status. The broader population appears to have enjoyed relative prosperity, with most burials containing some grave goods and evidence of adequate nutrition. Settlement patterns reveal hierarchical relationships between communities. Larger centers show evidence of administrative control over surrounding settlements, including standardized weights and measures, coordinated defensive systems, and shared ceremonial practices. This hierarchical organization would provide the political and administrative framework for the later unified Arzawan kingdom. The scattered Proto-Arzawan communities that had gradually coalesced during preceding centuries faced mounting external pressures that would forge them into a unified political entity. Hittite expansion from the north and increasing Mesopotamian commercial influence created both threats and opportunities demanding coordinated responses beyond individual city-state capabilities. The solution emerged through complex diplomatic negotiation, strategic marriages, and gradual administrative integration that transformed Western Anatolia's political landscape. The consolidation process began around 1650 BC, when archaeological evidence reveals significant changes in settlement patterns and material culture across the region. Multiple sites show simultaneous construction of similar administrative buildings, standardized fortification systems, and coordinated urban planning that could only have resulted from centralized direction. Most compelling evidence comes from Besa Sultan Level 4, where excavators uncovered a massive palace complex featuring administrative archives, ceremonial halls, and residential quarters arranged according to sophisticated architectural programs appearing at contemporary sites throughout Western Anatolia. These administrative centers were connected by extensive road and communication networks, enabling rapid coordination across the emerging kingdom's territories. Archaeological surveys identified numerous way stations, storage depots, and signal towers forming comprehensive infrastructure supporting both military operations and commercial activities. The road system itself demonstrates remarkable engineering capabilities with stone-paved sections, drainage systems, and bridges remaining functional for centuries after construction. The location of Arzawa's primary capital has generated considerable scholarly debate, though mounting evidence points to a major urban center in the fertile Hermus River Valley, possibly near modern Manisa or extending toward the Aegean coastal plain. Geophysical surveys revealed extensive buried structures consistent with a major Bronze Age city, massive defensive walls, palace complexes, residential districts that could have housed tens of thousands. The site's strategic position provided control over inland trade routes and access to maritime commerce, while abundant agricultural resources in the surrounding valley could support large urban populations. But establishing the kingdom required more than just building cities. Alternative theories place the capital further inland, possibly around modern Ushak or Afyon, where several large Bronze Age sites show evidence of significant administrative and ceremonial activities. These locations would have provided better defensive positions against northern threats while maintaining access to important mineral resources and trade routes. Recent excavations at Karahoyuk near Konya uncovered impressive fortifications and administrative buildings that some scholars argue could represent the Arzawan capital, though dating remains controversial. Administrative systems developed during consolidation demonstrate remarkable sophistication and innovation. Cuneiform tablets discovered at various sites reveal complex bureaucratic hierarchies with specialized departments responsible for different governance aspects. Archives include detailed records of tax collection, military organization, diplomatic correspondence, and judicial proceedings providing unprecedented insight into Arzawan governmental structures. Documents show the kingdom was divided into administrative districts, each governed by appointed officials reporting directly to central authority. Legal codes reflect both Mesopotamian influence and distinctly Anatolian traditions. Surviving legal texts written in Luwian using cuneiform script address, property rights, commercial transactions, criminal offenses, and family law with remarkable detail and consistency. Particularly notable, provisions for women's rights, including property ownership and inheritance, appearing more liberal than contemporary Mesopotamian or Hittite legal traditions. The codes also established standardized weights, measures, and currency systems, facilitating trade throughout the kingdom and with foreign partners. Diplomatic protocols enabled Arzawa to navigate complex international relations of the Late Bronze Age effectively. Surviving correspondence with Egyptian pharaohs, Mesopotamian rulers, and other Anatolian kingdoms reveals sophisticated diplomatic practices including treaty negotiations, marriage alliances, and commercial agreements. The famous Amarna letters include several communications between Arzawan kings and Egyptian pharaohs, demonstrating the kingdom's recognition as a major regional power capable of independent foreign policy. Military innovations transformed Arzawa from a collection of city-states into a formidable regional power capable of projecting force across western Anatolia. Archaeological evidence reveals significant advances in metallurgy, particularly bronze weapons and armor production, using improved alloy compositions and manufacturing techniques. Weapon caches discovered at various sites include sophisticated spears, swords, and arrowheads, demonstrating both technical skill and standardized production methods, suggesting centralized military supply systems. Development of horse-drawn warfare represents one of Arzawa's most significant military innovations. Excavated remains of horse burials, chariot parts, and associated equipment indicate Arzawan forces adopted and refined chariot warfare techniques proven effective elsewhere. Training facilities identified through archaeological survey include circular tracks, obstacle courses, and specialized buildings housing both horses and equipment. The kingdom's position provided access to excellent horse breeding territories in inland valleys, while trade connections ensured access to specialized knowledge and equipment necessary for effective chariot operations. Fortification systems reveal sophisticated defensive strategies adapted to local geographical conditions. The massive walls at Sardis, built during early consolidation, incorporate multiple defensive lines, sally ports, and integrated water systems sustaining lengthy sieges. Similar fortifications at other major centers show coordinated defensive planning suggesting kingdom-wide military engineering standards and shared tactical doctrines. Expansion campaigns launched from these secure bases brought much of western Anatolia under direct Arzawan control through a combination of military conquest and diplomatic integration. Campaign records preserved in administrative archives describe coordinated operations involving multiple armies, extensive logistical support, and sophisticated intelligence gathering. Conquest of Aegean coastal regions proceeded systematically with Arzawan forces establishing fortified positions, controlling key harbors and trade routes while respecting local customs and administrative structures. Naval capabilities developed during these coastal campaigns enabled Arzawa to project power across the eastern Aegean and establish commercial relationships with island communities and mainland Greek settlements. Archaeological evidence from coastal sites includes harbor installations, shipyards, and naval equipment demonstrating significant maritime capabilities. Underwater archaeology revealed several Bronze Age shipwrecks carrying Arzawan goods, confirming the kingdom's active participation in Mediterranean trade networks. Integration of conquered territories proceeded through carefully designed policies balancing central control with local autonomy. Administrative documents reveal flexible systems allowing conquered communities to maintain traditional practices while accepting Arzawan oversight in military and diplomatic matters. This approach minimized resistance while maximizing economic benefits from expanded territories and populations. Cultural developments during expansion and consolidation created distinctive artistic and architectural traditions, defining classical Arzawan civilization. Palace complexes constructed at major centers feature innovative architectural elements including columned halls, ceremonial courtyards, and integrated water systems, demonstrating both aesthetic sophistication and practical functionality. The palace at Beka Sultan includes elaborate wall paintings depicting religious ceremonies, hunting scenes, and mythological narratives providing unique insights into Arzawan cultural values and artistic capabilities. Sculpture workshops produced distinctive works combining Anatolian traditions with influences from Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Aegean world. Relief carvings on building facades and freestanding sculptures demonstrate sophisticated carving techniques and complex iconographic programs celebrating royal power, religious devotion, and cultural identity. The famous Arzawan Sphinx sculptures discovered at several palace sites show particular artistic innovation combining traditional Near Eastern motifs with distinctly Anatolian stylistic elements. Pottery production achieved new levels of sophistication and standardization. Specialized workshops produced high-quality ceramics for domestic use and export with distinctive forms and decorative schemes becoming recognized throughout the Eastern Mediterranean as distinctly Arzawan products. Chemical analysis of pottery finds at sites across the region confirms existence of centralized production centers supplying standardized goods throughout the kingdom and beyond. Religious practices evolved into complex ceremonial systems, reinforcing royal authority while maintaining connections to traditional Anatolian spiritual traditions. Temple complexes constructed at major centers feature elaborate architectural programs designed to accommodate large-scale public ceremonies and private royal rituals. The Great Temple at Ephesus, though later rebuilt multiple times, appears to have originated during this period as a major Arzawan religious center dedicated to the storm god Tarhuns and associated deities. Religious art and iconography reveal sophisticated theological concepts integrating traditional Anatolian nature worship with more abstract divine concepts borrowed from Mesopotamian and Egyptian sources. Seal impressions and relief carvings show complex mythological scenes involving interactions between gods, kings, and natural forces reflecting both political ideology and genuine spiritual beliefs. Development of writing systems enabled more sophisticated record-keeping and cultural expression. While Arzawan scribes continued using cuneiform for administrative and diplomatic purposes, evidence suggests experimentation with hieroglyphic writing systems that may have influenced later Anatolian scripts. Literary texts preserved in palace archives include hymns, historical narratives, and legal precedents demonstrating growing cultural sophistication and intellectual achievement. Trade networks established during expansion connected Arzawa to commercial systems spanning the known world. Archaeological evidence reveals Arzawan goods in contexts ranging from Mycenaean Greece to Mesopotamian cities, while foreign products found at Arzawan sites confirm reciprocal exchange relationships. The kingdom's strategic position enabled it to serve as crucial intermediary between different cultural and economic zones, generating substantial wealth funding, further expansion, and cultural development. Mining operations expanded significantly to meet growing demands for metals domestically and for export. Archaeological surveys identified numerous Bronze Age mining sites in the Taurus Mountains and other mineral-rich regions, showing evidence of large-scale organized extraction activities. Smelting facilities and metalwork centers processed raw materials into finished goods, supplying both military needs and commercial exports. Agricultural innovation supported growing urban populations and military forces, characterizing this expansion period. Irrigation systems, terrace farming, and improved crop varieties increased agricultural productivity, while specialized facilities processed and stored surplus production for redistribution. Administrative records detail complex systems for collecting, storing, and distributing agricultural products, sustaining both urban centers and military campaigns. The prosperity and territorial expansion characterizing Arzawa's golden age began encountering serious challenges as a new power consolidated control over central Anatolia. The Hittite Empire, emerging from its capital at Hattusa, represented a fundamentally different approach to Anatolian politics than loose confederations and city-state alliances that had previously dominated the region. Unlike the Arzawans, who built their kingdom through gradual integration and diplomatic accommodation, the Hittites pursued aggressive military expansion backed by sophisticated administrative systems and an ideology of divine kingship brooking no equals. Initial contact between the two kingdoms occurred through diplomatic channels around 1430 BC, when Hittite envoys arrived at the Arzawan court bearing proposals for commercial agreements and territorial demarcation. Cuneiform tablets discovered in palace archives record these early negotiations, revealing a complex dance of mutual recognition tempered by underlying territorial ambitions. The Hittite king Tudhaliya approached Arzawa as potential ally against common enemies, particularly troublesome Kaska tribes threatening both kingdoms' northern territories. These diplomatic overtures included offers of marriage alliances, shared military campaigns, and coordinated responses to Egyptian expansion in the Levant. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals significant changes in Arzawan military preparations and defensive strategies. Fortification systems at major centers underwent extensive modifications, with existing walls reinforced and new defensive works constructed according to updated military engineering principles. The fortress complex at Sardis received additional outer walls, improved gate systems, and specialized offensive installations designed to counter siege warfare techniques proven effective in Hittite campaigns elsewhere. Similar upgrades appeared simultaneously at other Arzawan strongholds, suggesting coordinated defensive planning in response to perceived Hittite threats. The Arzawan response to Hittite diplomatic initiatives reflected deep divisions within the kingdom's ruling elite. Administrative documents record heated debates in royal councils between factions advocating accommodation and those demanding resistance to Hittite expansion. The accommodation faction, led by powerful noble families with extensive commercial interests, argued cooperation with the Hittites would provide security and economic benefits while preserving Arzawan autonomy. They pointed to successful diplomatic relationships with Egypt and Mesopotamian kingdoms as precedents for managing relations with powerful neighbors without sacrificing independence. Opposition voices warned that Hittite diplomatic overtures masked expansionist ambitions, ultimately resulting in Arzawan subjugation. These resistance advocates, often representing military commanders and regional governors from frontier territories, argued the Hittite administrative system left no room for genuine allied relationships. They cited examples of other Anatolian kingdoms accepting Hittite protection only to find themselves reduced to vassal status within generations. Archaeological evidence supports their concerns, as excavations at former Hittite ally sites reveal systematic replacement of local administrative systems with Hittite bureaucratic structures. King Tarunadu, ascending to the Arzawan throne around 1420 BC, initially pursued a cautious middle course, seeking to maintain diplomatic relations while strengthening military capabilities. His reign began with extensive military reforms, modernizing Arzawan forces according to contemporary warfare standards. Infantry units received improved bronze weapons manufactured in centralized armories using standardized designs and quality controls. Chariot forces expanded significantly with new breeding programs, producing larger, more robust horses capable of carrying heavier equipment and armor. Tarunadu's military innovations extended beyond equipment to include tactical and organizational reforms, reflecting careful study of Hittite military methods. Training facilities featured specialized areas for different combat instruction types, including siege warfare, cavalry operations, and coordinated infantry maneuvers. Officer training programs established formal military education systems, producing professional commanders capable of leading complex operations. These reforms transformed the Arzawan military from regional militia collections into a unified professional army capable of challenging major powers. Strategic alliance building became a cornerstone of Tarunadu's foreign policy as he sought to balance Hittite pressure through diplomatic relationships with other regional powers. Correspondence preserved in palace archives reveals extensive negotiations with Mycenaean Greek kingdoms, Cypriot city-states, and even distant Egyptian territories. These diplomatic initiatives produced several significant agreements, including mutual defense pacts, commercial treaties, and intelligence sharing arrangements, providing Arzawa with crucial information about Hittite military preparations and political developments. The most significant alliance involved the Kingdom of Arzawa, identified by most scholars with Mycenaean Greek territories in the Aegean region. Diplomatic correspondence between Arzawan and Arzawan courts reveals sophisticated negotiations producing military cooperation agreements, shared naval operations, and coordinated responses to Hittite expansion. Archaeological evidence from Aegean sites includes Arzawan weapons, pottery, and luxury goods, confirming extensive material exchanges supporting these political relationships. Border tensions escalated significantly around 1400 BC when competing territorial claims in the Seha River land created the first serious military confrontations between Arzawan and Hittite forces. The Seha River land, encompassing fertile northwestern Anatolian valleys, represented crucial strategic territory controlling access routes between central Anatolia and the Aegean coast. Both kingdoms claimed historical rights based on previous conquests and administrative arrangements, but the area's strategic importance made compromise impossible. Initial skirmishes involved relatively small forces conducting raids and counter-raids designed to establish territorial control without triggering full-scale warfare. Arzawan forces operating from fortified positions established during earlier expansion campaigns conducted systematic attacks against Hittite settlements and military installations. These operations targeted supply lines, communication networks, and administrative centers rather than engaging in direct confrontations with major Hittite armies. Archaeological evidence from affected sites reveals extensive destruction layers dating to this period with burned buildings, scattered weapons, and hasty repairs indicating these border conflicts' intensity. Hittite responses demonstrated their superior organizational capabilities and military resources. Rather than matching Arzawan raiding tactics, Hittite commanders launched coordinated campaigns designed to capture and hold strategic positions. Their forces constructed fortified camps at crucial crossroads and river crossings, establishing permanent military presence, gradually restricting Arzawan movement and supply operations. Engineering capabilities enabled Hittite forces to build these installations rapidly using standardized designs and prefabricated components transported from central supply depots. Proxy warfare characterized much of this conflict, with both kingdoms supporting local allies and client states in contested territories. Arzawan diplomats provided weapons, training, and financial support to tribal groups and minor kingdoms opposing Hittite expansion, while Hittite agents worked to undermine Arzawan influence through similar means. Archaeological evidence from smaller settlements in contested regions reveals mixed material cultures reflecting these competing influences as local populations navigated between rival powers. Intelligence operations became increasingly sophisticated as both kingdoms sought advantages through information gathering and political manipulation. Arzawan records describe extensive spy networks operating in Hittite territory, providing detailed reports on military preparations, political developments, and economic conditions. These intelligence operations required substantial resources and coordination with specially trained agents, secure communication systems, and financial networks supporting operations across enemy territory. Similar Hittite activities in Arzawan lands created an atmosphere of suspicion and security concerns affecting all society levels. The Luka lands, encompassing mountainous regions of southern Anatolia, became another major conflict theater as both kingdoms sought to control these strategically important territories. The Luka peoples, organized into numerous small kingdoms and tribal confederations, possessed significant military capabilities and strategic resources, making them valuable allies. Arzawan efforts to maintain influence in these regions involved complex diplomatic negotiations, military assistance, and commercial agreements, competing directly with similar Hittite initiatives. Military technology developments reflected intensifying competition between the two kingdoms. Arzawan metalworkers produced increasingly sophisticated weapons and armor with improved alloy compositions, better manufacturing techniques, and innovative designs providing tactical advantages in specific combat situations. Siege warfare equipment received particular attention, with engineers developing specialized catapults, battering rams, and scaling devices designed to overcome improved fortification systems. Naval warfare emerged as a new conflict dimension as both kingdoms sought to control maritime trade routes and coastal territories. Arzawan naval forces, building on earlier commercial maritime experience, developed specialized warships capable of conducting military operations against Hittite coastal positions and allied territories. These vessels, larger and more heavily armed than commercial ships, featured reinforced hulls, specialized weapons platforms, and crew accommodations designed for extended military campaigns. Internal political pressures intensified as prolonged conflict strained Arzawan resources and tested national unity. Administrative records reveal growing tensions between different regions and social groups over military service obligations, taxation levels, and resource allocation priorities. Urban populations, particularly merchants and craftsmen, dependent on peaceful trade relationships, increasingly questioned military policies disrupting commercial activities and threatening economic prosperity. Rural communities faced different challenges as military recruitment and agricultural requisitions reduced available labor and resources for farming activities. Religious and ideological dimensions of the conflict became increasingly prominent as both kingdoms sought divine justification for their territorial claims and military actions. Arzawan royal inscriptions emphasized the kingdom's role as defender of traditional Anatolian religious practices against foreign influences, while Hittite propaganda portrayed their expansion as divinely mandated unification of Anatolian peoples under legitimate authority. Temple complexes in both kingdoms received substantial investments in construction and ritual activities designed to demonstrate divine favor and support for royal policies. Diplomatic initiatives continued throughout this period of military conflict, as both sides recognized the costs and risks of prolonged warfare. Negotiation attempts involved complex proposals for territorial division, tribute arrangements, and mutual recognition agreements that might have resolved competing claims without further military action. These diplomatic efforts failed primarily because fundamental disagreements about political organization and territorial sovereignty proved impossible to reconcile through compromise. The Hittite conception of unified imperial authority conflicted irreconcilably with Arzawan traditions of autonomous regional governance and confederated political structures. Economic warfare became an increasingly important conflict aspect as both kingdoms sought to undermine their opponent's resource base and military capabilities. Arzawan efforts to disrupt Hittite trade routes included naval operations against merchant shipping, diplomatic pressure on trading partners, and support for rebellious territories controlling crucial commercial networks. Hittite responses involved similar economic pressure tactics, combined with military operations designed to capture Arzawan commercial centers and productive territories. The prolonged nature of these conflicts gradually transformed both kingdoms' political and social structures. Military demands required expanded administrative systems, increased taxation, and greater central control over regional resources and populations. These changes strengthened royal authority while reducing traditional noble privileges and local autonomy. Archaeological evidence reveals growing standardization in material culture, administrative practices, and settlement organization, reflecting increasing centralization driven by military necessities. The death of Tudalia II in 1344 BC created a succession crisis within the Hittite Empire that King Tarunadu of Arzawa viewed as an unprecedented opportunity to reverse decades of territorial losses and restore his kingdom's regional dominance. The new Hittite king, Mursili II, faced immediate challenges from multiple directions as rebellious vassals throughout Anatolia and Syria sensed weakness in the imperial center. Kaska tribes launched devastating raids against northern Hittite territories, while Egyptian forces pressed their advantage in the Levant. Within this context of imperial crisis, Tarunadu made the fateful decision to break the uneasy peace characterizing his predecessor's final years and launch a comprehensive campaign to reclaim Arzawan territories lost during previous conflicts. The catalyst for full-scale war emerged from a complex dispute over succession rights in the Seha Riverland, where a local ruler's death without clear heirs created competing claims both kingdoms sought to exploit. Arzawan forces moved swiftly to install their preferred candidate, a minor noble with distant family connections to the deceased ruler, but strong ties to Arzawan commercial interests. Simultaneously, Hittite administrators arrived with their own claimant, backed by legal documents asserting imperial authority over succession matters in vassal territories. The resulting confrontation escalated rapidly when Arzawan troops refused to withdraw, leading to the first major battle between regular forces from both kingdoms since the border skirmishes of the previous generation. Archaeological evidence from the Seha River battlefield reveals this initial engagement's scale and intensity. Weapon fragments scattered across a wide area indicate both armies deployed their full range of military capabilities, including heavy infantry, chariot forces, and specialized siege equipment. Bronze arrowheads found in concentrated clusters suggest sustained archery exchanges, while damaged chariot components and horse remains indicate significant cavalry involvement. Battlefield archaeology also reveals evidence of systematic looting and destruction following the engagement, with valuable bronze weapons and equipment removed, while less portable items were abandoned or deliberately destroyed. Tarunadu's strategic calculations proved initially successful, as Hittite forces stretched thin across multiple theaters could not immediately respond with overwhelming force to the Arzawan challenge. Intelligence reports preserved in palace archives indicate Arzawan commanders had accurately assessed Hittite military commitments and timed their offensive to exploit temporary weaknesses in imperial defenses. The Arzawan army advancing into contested territories was the largest military force the kingdom had ever assembled. Incorporating not only regular troops from the kingdom's core territories, but also substantial contingents from allied cities, mercenary companies recruited from throughout the eastern Mediterranean, and specialized units trained specifically for siege warfare against Hittite fortifications. Innovative military tactics employed by Arzawan forces during opening campaigns demonstrated sophisticated understanding of contemporary warfare principles and careful adaptation to local geographical conditions. Rather than attempting direct assaults against heavily fortified Hittite positions, Arzawan commanders implemented a strategy of systematic isolation, targeting supply lines, communication networks, and administrative centers supporting enemy strongholds. Mobile forces equipped with latest bronze weapons and supported by efficient logistical systems conducted coordinated operations across wide areas, forcing Hittite garrisons to divide attention between multiple threats while preventing effective coordination between separated units. But Mursili II was already planning his devastating counterattack. Siege warfare innovations introduced during these campaigns represented significant advances in military engineering and tactical coordination. Arzawan engineers developed portable siege towers constructed from standardized components that could be rapidly assembled at target locations, providing protected platforms for archers and assault troops while enabling more effective attacks against defensive walls. Battering ram designs incorporated bronze-reinforced heads and improved suspension systems, increasing striking power while reducing vulnerability to defensive countermeasures. Most significantly, coordinated artillery systems using multiple catapults enabled concentrated bombardments that could breach fortification walls or suppress defensive fire during assault operations. The systematic nature of Arzawan siege operations reflected careful planning and extensive preparation underway for several years before the conflict began. Archaeological excavations at military production centers reveal specialized workshops dedicated to manufacturing siege equipment with standardized designs enabling mass production of interchangeable components. Storage facilities contain stockpiles of prefabricated materials, specialized tools, and finished equipment sufficient to support multiple simultaneous siege operations. Training facilities included full-scale mock-ups of typical Hittite fortifications, where assault troops practiced coordinated attacks using actual siege equipment under realistic conditions. Mursili II's initial response to the Arzawan offensive demonstrated both strengths and limitations of Hittite military organization. The imperial system's emphasis on centralized command and standardized procedures enabled rapid mobilization of substantial forces from distant territories. But the same organizational structure created delays in decision-making and reduced flexibility in responding to unexpected tactical situations. Hittite forces that eventually confronted the Arzawan advance were well-equipped and professionally trained, but their commanders operated under rigid tactical doctrines, proving inadequate against Arzawan innovations and local geographical challenges. The first major confrontation between the full armies of both kingdoms occurred near the strategic city of Apasa, where Hittite forces attempted to relieve a besieged garrison, while Arzawan troops sought to complete their conquest of this crucial coastal stronghold. The battle demonstrated tactical evolution occurring in both armies since their previous major engagement decades earlier. Hittite forces deployed in traditional formations, emphasizing heavy infantry supported by chariot units, while Arzawan commanders experimented with more flexible arrangements integrating different unit types and combined arms formations designed to exploit specific tactical opportunities. Chariot warfare during this engagement revealed significant technological and tactical innovations on both sides. Arzawan chariots featured improved designs with larger wheels, reinforced axles, and enhanced armor protection, enabling more aggressive tactical employment while reducing vulnerability to enemy weapons. Crew training emphasized coordination between driver and warrior, enabling complex maneuvers, including rapid deployment, sustained archery fire, and coordinated charges that could break enemy formations. Hittite chariot forces maintained traditional emphasis on shock action and individual combat prowess, but their tactical doctrine proved less effective against Arzawan defensive arrangements, including specialized anti-chariot weapons and coordinated infantry support. Infantry combat during the Apasa campaign demonstrated continuing importance of traditional weapons and tactics despite technological innovations in other areas. Archaeological evidence from battlefield sites reveals extensive use of bronze-tipped spears, reinforced shields, and improved body armor, providing enhanced protection while maintaining mobility necessary for complex battlefield maneuvers. Close combat techniques emphasized formation fighting requiring extensive training and discipline, with individual skill less important than unit cohesion and coordinated tactical movements. Medical evidence from skeletal remains indicates combat injuries were severe and often fatal, with weapons capable of penetrating contemporary armor and causing devastating wounds. The siege of Apasa itself became a testing ground for military engineering innovations as both sides employed increasingly sophisticated techniques to gain tactical advantages. Arzawan's siege works included multiple parallel trenches, reinforced artillery positions, and underground tunneling operations designed to undermine defensive walls. Counter-siege measures implemented by the Hittite garrison featured sally port attacks, defensive artillery, and engineering operations intended to disrupt enemy siege works. The prolonged nature of the siege enabled both sides to experiment with new techniques and equipment, creating an evolutionary process rapidly advancing siege warfare capabilities. Naval operations during coastal campaigns introduced maritime warfare as a significant factor in the broader conflict. Arzawan naval forces operating from secure bases in friendly territories conducted systematic attacks against Hittite coastal positions while providing logistical support for land-based operations. These naval units featured specialized warships equipped with bronze-reinforced rams, artillery platforms, and troop transport capabilities, enabling amphibious operations against enemy coastal fortifications. Hittite responses included construction of coastal defense installations, development of their own naval capabilities, and diplomatic efforts to secure Allied naval support from other maritime powers. The devastating effectiveness of Arzawan military innovations became apparent as Hittite strongholds throughout western Anatolia fell to systematic siege operations, combining tactical innovation with overwhelming numerical superiority. Archaeological evidence from conquered sites reveals extensive destruction layers indicating thorough demolition of defensive installations, administrative buildings, and military facilities. Population displacement appears systematic, with entire communities relocated to prevent future resistance while their territories were integrated into Arzawan administrative systems. This systematic approach to conquest reflected careful planning and substantial administrative capabilities, enabling effective occupation and control of captured territories. Intelligence operations played crucial roles in Arzawan military successes during the war's early phases. Spy networks established during previous decades provided detailed information about Hittite military dispositions, defensive capabilities, and internal political conditions, enabling precise targeting of vulnerable positions. Sabotage operations conducted by trained agents disrupted enemy communications, damaged military equipment, and created confusion, facilitating Arzawan tactical operations. Counterintelligence measures protected Arzawan operational security while identifying and neutralizing Hittite intelligence activities in friendly territories. The psychological impact of early Arzawan victories extended far beyond immediate military consequences, as subject populations throughout the Hittite Empire began questioning imperial authority and considering rebellion. Administrative documents from this period record widespread unrest in territories distant from the primary theater of operations, with local officials requesting military reinforcements to maintain order. Some vassal rulers openly defected to the Arzawan cause, providing additional military forces and strategic intelligence while denying resources to the Hittite war effort. These political developments forced Mursili II to divert substantial military resources to internal security operations, reducing forces available for operations against Arzawa. Supply and logistics operations supporting the Arzawan offensive demonstrated sophisticated organizational capabilities, enabling sustained military operations across extended distances and time periods. Archaeological evidence from supply depots reveals standardized storage facilities, transportation equipment, and administrative systems coordinating resource distribution among multiple army units operating in different theaters. Specialized production centers manufactured military equipment, processed food supplies, and maintained weapons and equipment using techniques maximizing efficiency while maintaining quality standards necessary for effective military operations. Medical services supporting Arzawan military operations included field hospitals, trained medical personnel, and specialized equipment for treating combat injuries and maintaining army health during extended campaigns. Skeletal evidence from military cemeteries indicates wounded soldiers received sophisticated medical care, including surgical procedures, bone setting, and wound treatment, enabling many to survive injuries that would have been fatal without proper medical attention. These medical capabilities not only reduced casualty rates, but also maintained morale by demonstrating royal concern for soldier welfare. Religious and ceremonial activities accompanying military operations reinforced ideological justifications for the war while maintaining divine favor for Arzawan forces. Army chaplains conducted regular ceremonies honoring traditional deities, particularly the storm god Tarhuns, who was believed to provide protection and victory in battle. Ritual deposits found at temporary military camps include offerings of weapons, precious objects, and animal sacrifices, demonstrating systematic religious observances designed to maintain spiritual support for military operations. Victory celebrations following successful engagements featured elaborate ceremonies honoring both divine assistance and human achievements, while reinforcing unit cohesion and fighting spirit. But then, everything changed. Mursili II, having consolidated his position in the Hittite heartland and suppressed the most dangerous rebellions, turned his full attention to the Arzawan threat. What followed was one of the most devastating military campaigns in Bronze Age history. The catastrophic defeat at Apasa marked the beginning of Arzawa's systematic dismemberment as an independent political entity. Mursili II's subsequent campaigns, conducted with methodical precision throughout his reign's remaining years, transformed the once mighty kingdom into a collection of fragmented territories under direct Hittite administrative control. The process of political dissolution occurred not through a single decisive conquest, but rather through carefully orchestrated series of military operations, diplomatic manipulations, and administrative reorganizations, systematically eliminating Arzawan resistance while preserving the region's economic productivity and strategic value. The immediate aftermath of military defeat revealed fundamental weakness of Arzawan political structures when confronted with sustained external pressure. Archaeological evidence from major administrative centers shows hasty abandonment of palace complexes, with valuable archives buried or scattered and administrative equipment destroyed to prevent capture by advancing Hittite forces. The royal court's evacuation from the capital created a power vacuum that regional governors and military commanders attempted to fill through improvised arrangements lacking central coordination or unified strategic direction. These localized responses, while demonstrating individual initiative and loyalty, proved inadequate against Hittite forces operating according to comprehensive imperial strategies developed through decades of successful expansion campaigns. Hittite administrative policies implemented in conquered Arzawan territories reflected sophisticated understanding of regional political dynamics and economic structures. Rather than imposing uniform imperial governance that might provoke continued resistance, Hittite administrators adapted control mechanisms to local conditions while ensuring effective resource extraction and prevention of future rebellions. The resulting system of indirect rule preserved existing social hierarchies and cultural practices where they served imperial interests while systematically eliminating political institutions and military capabilities that might support independence movements. The creation of Mira Kuwalia as a distinct administrative entity exemplified Hittite strategies for managing conquered territories through controlled fragmentation. This new political unit encompassed fertile river valleys of central western Anatolia, including territories forming the economic heartland of the former Arzawan kingdom. Hittite administrators appointed Mashwilua, a member of the Arzawan royal family who had demonstrated loyalty during the final campaigns, as ruler of this truncated domain. His appointment represented a calculated decision to provide legitimacy for the new arrangement while ensuring absolute dependence on Hittite support for maintaining authority. The treaty establishing Mira Kuwalia's subordinate status, preserved in cuneiform tablets from Hittite archives, reveals comprehensive nature of imperial control mechanisms imposed on former Arzawan territories. Mashwilua's authority extended only to internal administrative matters and local judicial proceedings, while military affairs, foreign relations, and major economic decisions remained under direct Hittite supervision. Annual tribute obligations included substantial quantities of silver, textiles, livestock, and manufactured goods, representing systematic extraction of regional wealth for imperial purposes. Military service requirements obligated Mira-Kuwalia to provide troops for Hittite campaigns, while prohibiting maintenance of independent military forces capable of challenging imperial authority. Archaeological evidence from Mira-Kuwalia's administrative centers reveals significant changes in material culture and settlement organization following imposition of Hittite control. Palace complexes underwent systematic modifications, eliminating defensive capabilities while enhancing ceremonial and administrative functions appropriate for a vassal ruler. Fortification walls were dismantled or reduced to symbolic remnants, while new construction emphasized residential and storage facilities supporting tribute collection and imperial administration. Artifact assemblages show increasing standardization according to Hittite imperial norms, with local craft traditions gradually replaced by imperial styles and techniques reflecting cultural integration policies. The establishment of Hapala as another vassal entity demonstrated Hittite flexibility in adapting administrative arrangements to diverse geographical and cultural conditions. This mountainous region, encompassing rugged territories of south-central Anatolia, had maintained semi-autonomous status even during Arzawa's imperial expansion due to difficult terrain and fierce local resistance to outside control. Hittite administrators recognized that effective governance of these territories required accommodation with traditional tribal structures and customary practices proven resistant to previous unification efforts. Hapala's ruler, appointed from among local noble families with established authority and popular support, received greater autonomy in internal affairs than his counterpart in Mira-Kuwalia, but remained subject to the same fundamental restrictions on military and diplomatic activities. Treaty arrangements governing this relationship acknowledged traditional hunting and grazing rights, customary legal procedures, and religious practices, distinguishing mountain communities from lowland neighbors. These concessions reflected pragmatic recognition that excessive interference with established customs might provoke rebellions requiring costly military interventions to suppress. The Seha Riverland, scene of initial confrontations precipitating the Great War, received special attention in Hittite administrative reorganization due to its strategic importance for controlling access routes between central Anatolia and the Aegean coast. This region's complex political geography, featuring numerous small communities with diverse ethnic backgrounds and conflicting territorial claims, required sophisticated administrative solutions balancing competing interests while ensuring effective imperial control. Hittite administrators implemented a system of multiple overlapping jurisdictions, preventing any single local authority from accumulating sufficient power to challenge imperial oversight. Appointment of vassal rulers in the Seha Riverland involved careful selection of individuals possessing sufficient local credibility to maintain order while lacking independent power bases that might support future rebellions. These administrators, typically drawn from minor noble families with limited territorial holdings, received their authority directly from Hittite imperial officials and remained dependent on imperial support for maintaining their positions. Their administrative responsibilities focused primarily on tribute collection, population registration, and maintenance of transportation infrastructure, supporting imperial communication and military movements. Economic reorganization throughout former Arzawan territories proceeded according to systematic policies designed to integrate regional resources into the broader Hittite imperial economy while preventing accumulation of wealth and military capabilities that might support independence movements. Traditional craft production centers underwent significant modifications as imperial administrators imposed new quality standards, production quotas, and distribution arrangements serving imperial rather than local interests. Textile manufacturing, which had been one of Arzawa's most profitable export industries, was systematically reorganized to supply imperial courts and military forces while reducing production of luxury goods for independent commercial networks. Mining operations in mineral-rich regions of the Taurus Mountains received particular attention from Hittite administrators who recognized strategic importance of controlling metal production for maintaining military superiority throughout Anatolia. Archaeological evidence from mining sites reveals extensive modifications to extraction and processing facilities, with new equipment, expanded workforce housing, and improved transportation systems, increasing production while ensuring imperial control over valuable resources. Specialized administrative personnel supervised all mining operations aspects, from workforce recruitment and training to final distribution of processed metals to imperial armories and commercial networks. Agricultural reorganization emphasized increased production of specific crops serving imperial needs while reducing regional self-sufficiency that might support future rebellions. Large estates producing grain, olives, and wine for imperial consumption replaced smaller farms providing diverse crops for local communities. This transformation required substantial population relocations as traditional farming communities were disrupted and reformed according to imperial agricultural policies. Administrative documents record systematic programs for redistributing landholdings, relocating populations, and establishing new settlement patterns, maximizing agricultural productivity while minimizing political autonomy. The tribute system imposed on vassal territories represented one of the most sophisticated aspects of Hittite imperial administration, combining systematic resource extraction with political control mechanisms, reinforcing imperial authority while providing incentives for local cooperation. Annual tribute obligations varied according to regional capabilities and strategic importance, with wealthy agricultural areas providing larger quantities of goods, while mountainous regions contributed specialized products like metals, timber, and livestock. The collection process involved detailed inventories, quality inspections, and transportation arrangements requiring extensive coordination between local administrators and imperial officials. Tribute goods included not only raw materials and agricultural products, but also manufactured items demonstrating local craft capabilities and cultural achievements. Textiles featuring distinctive regional designs, metalwork showcasing local techniques, and pottery representing traditional artistic styles served both economic and political functions by providing valuable goods for imperial use while preserving cultural elements, maintaining local identity within the imperial framework. This approach reflected sophisticated understanding of the relationship between cultural preservation and political stability in diverse imperial territories. The integration of Arzawan military traditions into Hittite imperial forces proceeded through carefully managed programs utilizing regional military expertise while eliminating independent military capabilities. Former Arzawan military commanders who demonstrated loyalty during the transition period received appointments in imperial forces, often serving in campaigns distant from their home territories where their knowledge of local conditions could not support rebellions. Specialized military units incorporating traditional Arzawan weapons and tactics were integrated into imperial armies, providing valuable capabilities while ensuring regional military knowledge served imperial rather than local interests. Recruitment policies for imperial military service emphasized individual advancement opportunities, attracting young men from former Arzawan territories while weakening traditional community structures. Military careers offered social mobility, economic advancement, and geographic mobility, appealing to ambitious individuals while removing potential leaders from local communities where they might organize resistance movements. Training programs conducted at imperial military centers exposed recruits to Hittite culture and values while providing professional skills, creating personal investment in imperial success. Cultural adaptation under Hittite rule revealed complex processes of accommodation and resistance, varying significantly across different social groups and geographical regions. Elite families who had held positions in the former Arzawan administration often embraced Hittite cultural practices as strategies for maintaining social status and accessing new opportunities within the imperial system. Archaeological evidence from elite residences shows adoption of Hittite architectural styles, decorative arts, and material culture, demonstrating cultural assimilation while preserving selected elements of traditional Arzawan identity. Religious practices underwent significant modifications as Hittite administrators promoted imperial religious observances while tolerating traditional local practices not conflicting with imperial ideology. Temple complexes received new dedications to Hittite deities while maintaining shrines to traditional Arzawan gods who were reinterpreted as regional manifestations of imperial divine powers. Ritual practices incorporated Hittite ceremonial elements while preserving traditional seasonal celebrations and community observances, maintaining cultural continuity within the new political framework. The preservation of Luwian language and cultural traditions occurred through complex processes of adaptation, enabling cultural survival within imperial political structures. Administrative documents reveal continued use of Luwian for local legal proceedings, commercial transactions, and religious observances, while Hittite became the required language for official communications with imperial authorities. Educational systems developed bilingual capabilities, enabling local populations to function effectively within imperial administrative structures while maintaining cultural connections to traditional practices and beliefs. Literary traditions adapted to imperial conditions through development of new narrative forms, incorporating Hittite historical perspectives while preserving traditional Arzawan cultural values and historical memories. Epic poems and historical narratives celebrated traditional heroes and cultural achievements while acknowledging legitimate authority of Hittite rulers and benefits of imperial membership. These literary adaptations served important functions in maintaining cultural identity while preventing development of historical narratives that might support independence movements. Craft traditions demonstrated remarkable resilience through adaptive strategies preserving traditional techniques and artistic styles while serving new markets and patrons within the imperial system. Pottery production maintained distinctive regional characteristics while incorporating imperial decorative elements appealing to broader markets. Metalwork traditions adapted traditional techniques to produce weapons and tools according to imperial specifications while preserving specialized knowledge distinguishing regional craftsmen. Textile production preserved traditional designs and techniques while adapting to new raw materials and quality standards imposed by imperial administrators. The carefully constructed imperial system governing Western Anatolia for over a century began showing signs of terminal strain by the early 13th century BC. Administrative documents from Hittite archives reveal mounting difficulties maintaining effective control over distant territories as the empire's resources became increasingly stretched across multiple theaters of operation. Tribute collections from vassal territories declined significantly, with reports of crop failures, population displacement, and local unrest creating cascading problems throughout the imperial administrative network. Archaeological evidence from major centers shows reduced construction activity, deferred maintenance of public buildings, and simplified material culture suggesting declining prosperity and administrative capacity. The first reports of strange maritime raiders appeared in Hittite intelligence documents around 1210 BC, describing coordinated attacks against coastal settlements throughout the eastern Mediterranean. These initial accounts, preserved in fragmentary cuneiform tablets from imperial archives, described seaborne forces of unprecedented size and organization conducting systematic raids against established trading centers and administrative installations. Unlike traditional piracy involving small-scale opportunistic attacks, these operations demonstrated sophisticated planning, extensive logistical support, and military capabilities enabling sustained campaigns against well-defended targets. The raiders' ethnic composition and origins remained mysterious to contemporary observers who referred to them collectively as sea peoples, while acknowledging their diverse cultural backgrounds and varying tactical approaches. Archaeological evidence from destroyed coastal sites reveals weapon types and pottery styles suggesting origins throughout the Aegean world, including regions maintaining commercial and diplomatic relationships with both Hittite and former Arzawan territories. The scale of destruction at these sites indicates forces far larger than typical raiding parties, with evidence of systematic demolition, population evacuation, and resource extraction suggesting organized military campaigns rather than spontaneous violence. Coastal settlements throughout western Anatolia faced immediate threats as Sea People's fleets appeared offshore conducting reconnaissance operations preceding major assault landings. The fortified harbor at Milawanda, which had served as crucial link between Hittite territories and Aegean commercial networks, suffered devastating attacks destroying port facilities, warehouse complexes, and administrative buildings. Archaeological excavations reveal thick destruction layers containing burned timber, collapsed stone walls, and scattered artifacts indicating rapid abandonment, followed by systematic looting. The harbor's strategic importance made its loss particularly damaging to imperial communications and supply networks depending on maritime transportation. The response of local Hittite administrators to these maritime threats revealed fundamental weaknesses in imperial defensive capabilities. Coastal fortifications had been designed primarily to control local populations and deter small-scale raids rather than repel major amphibious assaults conducted by well-equipped professional forces. Many defensive installations lacked adequate artillery, had insufficient garrison forces, and possessed limited supplies for sustaining prolonged sieges. Communication systems connecting coastal positions to interior administrative centers proved inadequate for coordinating rapid responses to multiple simultaneous threats across extended geographical areas. Mashuilawa of Mirakuwalia found his truncated domain facing unprecedented challenges as Sea People's forces penetrated inland river valleys, previously providing security from maritime threats. His limited military resources, constrained by treaty obligations prohibiting maintenance of substantial armed forces, proved completely inadequate for defending extensive territories under his nominal control. Administrative correspondence from this period reveals desperate requests for imperial military assistance combined with increasingly urgent reports of population displacement, agricultural disruption, and administrative breakdown as traditional governance structures collapsed under external pressure. The systematic nature of Sea People's operations became apparent as their forces demonstrated detailed knowledge of local geography, political structures, and economic resources, enabling precisely targeted attacks against crucial infrastructure. Rather than conducting random destructive raids, these forces systematically eliminated administrative centers, destroyed communication networks, and captured strategic positions controlling transportation routes and resource production. This operational sophistication suggested extensive intelligence gathering and careful planning, requiring substantial organizational capabilities and long-term strategic thinking. Archaeological evidence from inland sites reveals Sea People's forces adapted tactics effectively to different geographical and defensive conditions encountered moving away from coastal areas. River valley settlements faced coordinated attacks combining waterborne assault forces with land-based units surrounding defensive positions and preventing organized resistance. Mountain communities encountered specialized forces equipped for operations in difficult terrain, with evidence of systematic destruction of defensive installations and storage facilities, eliminating local resistance capabilities while preserving valuable resources for extraction. The collapse of established trade networks created cascading economic disruptions affecting communities throughout western Anatolia, regardless of direct exposure to Sea People's attacks. Commercial centers depending on predictable transportation routes and secure storage facilities found themselves unable to maintain normal business operations as traditional partners disappeared and established supply chains disintegrated. Archaeological evidence from trading posts and warehouse complexes shows hasty abandonment with valuable goods left behind and facilities destroyed to prevent their use by hostile forces. Hapala's mountainous territories initially provided some protection against maritime raiders, but the kingdom's dependence on lowland trading partners for essential goods created vulnerabilities becoming apparent as established commercial relationships collapsed. The ruler's attempts to maintain traditional tribute obligations to Hittite authorities became increasingly difficult as economic foundations supporting these payments disintegrated. Administrative documents record growing tensions between imperial demands for continued tribute and local populations facing severe hardships due to disrupted trade relationships and refugee influxes from affected coastal areas. Population movements triggered by Sea People's activities created humanitarian crises throughout western Anatolia as established communities struggled to accommodate displaced populations while maintaining their own survival. Archaeological evidence from settlement sites shows rapid expansion of residential areas, often constructed using improvised building techniques and inferior materials suggesting emergency accommodation for refugee populations. Cemetery evidence reveals increased mortality rates, malnutrition indicators, and trauma injuries demonstrating severe hardships faced by displaced communities during this upheaval period. The breakdown of imperial administrative systems created opportunities for local leaders to assert greater autonomy while simultaneously exposing their territories to external threats without imperial protection. Some regional commanders attempted organizing independent defensive arrangements, pooling resources from multiple communities to create ad hoc military forces capable of limited resistance against Sea People's incursions. These improvised arrangements achieved occasional tactical successes, but lacked resources and coordination necessary for effective strategic defense against well-organized enemy forces. Traditional Arzawan political structures, which had been suppressed but not entirely eliminated during Hittite domination, began re-emerging as imperial control weakened and local communities sought familiar organizational frameworks for addressing unprecedented challenges. Archaeological evidence suggests some communities attempted restoring pre-conquest administrative practices, religious observances, and social hierarchies, providing stability and identity during earlier independence periods. These restoration efforts faced significant obstacles due to generational changes, cultural adaptations, and practical difficulties in reconstructing complex institutional arrangements after decades of imperial rule. The restoration attempts revealed the extent to which traditional Arzawan institutions had been transformed during the vassalage period. Administrative practices had been modified to accommodate imperial requirements. Military traditions had been adapted to serve imperial rather than local interests. Economic systems had been restructured to support tribute obligations and imperial commercial networks. Religious practices had incorporated Hittite elements, while traditional ceremonies had been modified to acknowledge imperial authority. These adaptations meant restoration efforts often produced hybrid institutions, combining traditional elements with imperial innovations in ways reflecting complex cultural changes of the vassalage period. Military capabilities available to communities attempting to restore independence remained severely limited by systematic dismantling of traditional defense systems during the imperial period. Weapon stockpiles had been confiscated or redistributed. Fortification systems had been dismantled or neglected. Military training programs had been eliminated or redirected to serve imperial purposes. The few military commanders retaining knowledge of traditional Arzawan tactical doctrines were often elderly men whose experience dated to the pre-conquest period, creating significant gaps in military leadership and institutional knowledge necessary for effective resistance. The Sea People's impact on urban centers throughout western Anatolia varied significantly depending on defensive capabilities, geographical position, and strategic importance. Major administrative centers serving as focal points for imperial control faced systematic attacks designed to eliminate their capacity for coordinating regional resistance. Archaeological evidence from these sites reveals extensive destruction of palace complexes, administrative buildings, and storage facilities, often accompanied by evidence of systematic looting, removing valuable materials while destroying records and equipment that might support future administrative activities. Smaller settlements often faced different treatment from Sea People's forces, with some communities apparently reaching accommodation arrangements preserving local populations in exchange for cooperation or tribute payments. Archaeological evidence from these sites shows less extensive destruction, with residential areas often remaining intact, while administrative and defensive installations were systematically eliminated. This selective destruction pattern suggests Sea People's forces distinguished between different target types based on strategic considerations rather than pursuing indiscriminate destruction. The collapse of centralized religious institutions created spiritual crises compounding practical difficulties faced by communities throughout the region. Temple complexes serving as centers for community identity and social organization suffered systematic destruction, with religious artifacts scattered or removed and priestly hierarchies disrupted or eliminated. The loss of traditional religious frameworks left communities without familiar sources of spiritual guidance and social cohesion during periods of unprecedented stress and uncertainty. Attempts to maintain religious continuity under these difficult conditions reveal remarkable resilience and adaptability in local communities. Archaeological evidence suggests religious observances continued in improvised settings, with traditional ceremonies adapted to available resources and modified to address contemporary concerns about survival and community protection. Votive deposits from this period show simplified offerings and modified ritual practices, preserving essential spiritual elements while acknowledging practical constraints imposed by disrupted social and economic conditions. The breakdown of established legal and judicial systems created additional challenges for communities attempting to maintain social order during periods of crisis and displacement. Traditional legal authorities had often been eliminated or displaced, while established precedents and procedures proved inadequate for addressing unprecedented situations involving displaced populations, resource shortages, and external threats. Archaeological evidence suggests some communities developed improvised legal arrangements combining traditional practices with emergency measures designed to address immediate survival needs. Economic adaptation to the collapse of established systems required fundamental changes in production, distribution, and consumption patterns throughout Western Anatolia. Communities specializing in particular crafts or agricultural products for trade in imperial markets found themselves forced to develop more diverse economic bases capable of supporting local self-sufficiency. Archaeological evidence reveals increased household-level production of basic necessities, simplified craft techniques requiring fewer specialized materials, and modified agricultural practices emphasizing subsistence rather than commercial production. The preservation of cultural knowledge and technical skills during this disruption period required conscious efforts by community members recognizing the importance of maintaining traditional capabilities despite immediate survival pressures. Archaeological evidence suggests some craft specialists continued practicing traditional techniques despite reduced demand and limited access to raw materials. Educational activities continued in modified forms, with knowledge transmission occurring through informal arrangements, preserving essential cultural elements while adapting to changed circumstances. The final collapse of centralized authority in Western Anatolia, around 1180 BC, did not result in complete regional abandonment, but rather initiated a prolonged period of political fragmentation and cultural adaptation scholars term the Anatolian Dark Age. Archaeological investigations at sites throughout former Arzawan territories reveal a complex pattern of continuity and transformation as surviving communities developed new organizational structures while maintaining essential elements of their cultural identity. Material evidence from this poorly documented period demonstrates that while grand political structures of the Late Bronze Age had indeed collapsed, the underlying population remained and gradually evolved new forms of social and economic organization adapted to changed circumstances. Excavations at Besa Sultan reveal significant changes in settlement organization following destruction layers associated with the Sea Peoples period. The massive palace complex dominating the site during the Late Bronze Age was never rebuilt, but archaeological evidence shows continued occupation in modified residential areas constructed using salvage materials from destroyed administrative buildings. The new settlement pattern featured smaller, more defensible structures arranged around central courtyards, providing security while maintaining community cohesion. Pottery assemblages from these levels show clear continuity with earlier traditions while incorporating simplified production techniques, requiring fewer specialized resources and less centralized organization. Similar patterns of adaptive reoccupation appear at sites throughout the Hermus and Meander River valleys, where communities established themselves in easily defended positions, providing access to agricultural land and water sources while offering protection against potential raiders. The hilltop settlement at Sardis shows evidence of continuous occupation throughout the transition period, though on a much reduced scale compared to its late Bronze Age prominence. Residential structures from early Dark Age levels demonstrate sophisticated understanding of defensive architecture, with thick walls, limited access points, and integrated storage facilities, enabling communities to withstand brief sieges while maintaining normal domestic activities. The survival and evolution of Luwian-speaking communities throughout Western Anatolia provides crucial evidence for cultural continuity during this political disruption period. Hieroglyphic Luwian inscriptions from sites like Karatepe and other locations in southern Anatolia demonstrate the language not only survived the collapse, but continued to develop and evolve during Dark Age centuries. These inscriptions, though often brief and formulaic, preserve traditional royal titles, religious terminology, and administrative vocabulary connecting directly to earlier Arzawan political and cultural traditions. The continued use of Luwian in monumental contexts suggests local elites maintained awareness of their cultural heritage while adapting to changed political circumstances. Archaeological evidence from rural settlements reveals development of new agricultural strategies designed to maximize local self-sufficiency while minimizing dependence on external trade networks. Excavated farmsteads from this period show expanded storage facilities, diversified crop production, and integrated craft activities enabling individual households to meet most material needs through local resources. Archaeobotanical analysis reveals increased cultivation of hardy grains like barley and emmer wheat, providing reliable harvests even under adverse conditions, while reduced evidence for luxury crops suggests adaptation to more restricted economic circumstances. The transformation of craft production during the Dark Age reflects broader changes in economic organization and social structure throughout the region. Specialized workshops producing goods for elite consumption and long-distance trade were replaced by household-level production, emphasizing practical items needed for daily life. Pottery production shows particular adaptation, with simplified forms and decorative schemes maintaining aesthetic appeal while requiring less specialized knowledge and fewer exotic materials. Metalworking continued but focused primarily on essential tools and weapons rather than luxury items, with bronze working techniques adapted to use locally available materials and simplified production methods. Local political organizations emerging during the Dark Age demonstrate remarkable innovation in developing governance structures suited to the reduced scale and resources of post-collapse communities. Archaeological evidence from several sites suggests development of council-based decision-making systems distributing authority among multiple community leaders rather than concentrating power in individual rulers. Meeting places identified at sites like Aphrodisias feature circular or semicircular arrangements of stone seating accommodating community assemblies, while absence of elaborate throne rooms or audience halls suggests more egalitarian political arrangements than had characterized late Bronze Age kingdoms. The evolution of defensive strategies during this period reveals sophisticated adaptation to the changed security environment created by imperial protection systems' collapse. Communities developed coordinated warning systems using hilltop signal stations that could rapidly communicate threats across extended areas, enabling coordinated responses despite absence of centralized military organization. Archaeological surveys identified networks of small fortified positions controlling key mountain passes and river crossings, suggesting systematic defensive planning requiring cooperation between multiple independent communities. Religious practices during the Dark Age show both continuity with traditional Arzawan beliefs and adaptation to changed social and economic circumstances. Sanctuary sites throughout the region continued receiving votive offerings and ritual deposits, though these were generally simpler and less valuable than those from the Late Bronze Age. The persistence of traditional religious sites suggests communities maintained connection to ancestral spiritual traditions while adapting ceremonial practices to available resources. Rock-cut reliefs and simple stone monuments from this period preserve traditional iconographic elements, including storm god imagery and fertility symbols connecting Dark Age communities to their cultural heritage. The challenge of reconstructing political and social developments during this period stems primarily from dramatic reduction in written documentation compared to abundant archives of Late Bronze Age kingdoms. The collapse of centralized administrative systems eliminated systematic record-keeping, providing detailed information about earlier periods, while simplified material culture of Dark Age communities produced fewer inscribed objects and monumental texts. Archaeological evidence therefore becomes the primary source for understanding this period, requiring careful analysis of settlement patterns, artifact distributions, and architectural remains to reconstruct social and political developments. Trade relationships during the early Dark Age operated on much reduced scale compared to extensive commercial networks of the Late Bronze Age, but archaeological evidence demonstrates exchange relationships continued connecting communities across Western Anatolia and beyond. Obsidian analysis reveals continued exploitation of traditional source areas in central Anatolia, while chemical characterization of metal artifacts shows copper and tin continued reaching Western Anatolian communities through exchange networks that may have operated through multiple small-scale transactions rather than organized commercial systems of earlier periods. The gradual recovery of more extensive trade connections becomes archaeologically visible around 1000 BC when artifact assemblages begin showing increased quantities of imported materials and more sophisticated manufacturing techniques. Pottery styles from this period demonstrate renewed contact with Aegean communities, while metalwork shows improved quality and more complex forms suggesting access to better raw materials and technical knowledge. This recovery appears to have proceeded gradually and unevenly, with some communities establishing successful exchange relationships, while others remained largely isolated and self-sufficient. Settlement patterns developing during the later Dark Age period established foundations for subsequent historical developments in Western Anatolia. The preference for defensible hilltop positions characterizing the immediate post-collapse period gradually gave way to more accessible locations facilitating trade and communication. Archaeological surveys reveal establishment of new settlements along traditional trade routes, particularly in river valleys, providing both agricultural potential and transportation access. These settlement choices reflect growing confidence in regional security and renewed interest in participating in broader economic networks. The emergence of regional centers during the later Dark Age period demonstrates gradual reconcentration of political and economic authority that would eventually lead to new kingdoms' formation in Western Anatolia. Sites like Sardis show evidence of expanding settlement areas, improved fortifications, and increased craft production, suggesting growing importance as regional focal points. Archaeological evidence indicates these emerging centers attracted populations from smaller settlements, creating concentrations of people and resources, providing foundations for more complex political organizations. Technological developments during the Dark Age period reveal both continuity with Bronze Age traditions and innovation driven by changed circumstances and resource availability. The transition to iron technology occurred gradually throughout Western Anatolia, with iron objects appearing alongside traditional bronze implements in archaeological contexts from around 1100 BC. Early ironworking appears to have developed independently in multiple locations, with local smiths experimenting with techniques for working the new metal while maintaining traditional bronze working capabilities for items where iron was unsuitable. The quality of iron production improved significantly during the later Dark Age period, with archaeological evidence showing increasingly sophisticated forging techniques and better understanding of heat treatment processes, producing superior weapons and tools. Iron required different raw materials and techniques than bronze production, leading to changes in trade relationships and craft organization, contributing to broader economic and social transformations. The superior performance of iron weapons and tools provided advantages, encouraging rapid adoption once technical problems were resolved. Cultural memory and historical consciousness during the Dark Age period preserved important elements of Arzawan identity while adapting to changed circumstances. Oral traditions maintaining knowledge of past glory and cultural achievements provided continuity across generations lacking written historical records. Archaeological evidence suggests some communities preserve traditional ceremonies and festivals, commemorating historical events and cultural heroes, maintaining connection to their heritage while developing new traditions suited to contemporary conditions. The gradual development of new artistic traditions during the later Dark Age period demonstrates creative adaptation of traditional cultural elements to contemporary circumstances and available resources. Pottery decoration shows evolution from simplified geometric patterns toward more complex designs, incorporating traditional motifs while developing new stylistic elements. Metalwork and other crafts show similar patterns of innovation within traditional frameworks, suggesting craftsmen maintained awareness of historical traditions while developing new techniques and styles suited to changed conditions. Regional variations in Dark Age development reflect diverse geographical and cultural conditions throughout Western Anatolia, with different areas following distinct trajectories based on local resources, security situations, and cultural preferences. Coastal areas suffering severe damage during the Sea Peoples period showed slower recovery than inland regions experiencing less disruption. Mountain communities maintained more traditional lifestyles and political arrangements, while river valley settlements showed greater innovation and adaptation to new economic opportunities. The foundation for subsequent historical developments in Western Anatolia was established during the later Dark Age centuries as communities developed new institutions, technologies, and cultural practices that would influence the region's development for centuries to come. Archaeological evidence demonstrates that by 900 BC, Western Anatolia had developed new forms of political organization, economic systems, and cultural expression, building upon traditional foundations while incorporating innovations developed during the challenging centuries following the Bronze Age collapse. The gradual stabilization of Western Anatolia during the final Dark Age centuries created conditions favorable for new political entities' emergence that would fundamentally reshape the region's cultural and political landscape. Archaeological evidence from sites throughout former Arzawan territories reveals increasing prosperity, expanded settlement patterns, and renewed long-distance trade connections, providing foundation for more ambitious political projects. The most significant development occurred in fertile valleys around Sardis, where a dynasty claiming descent from Heraclid lineages began consolidating control over surrounding territories through military conquest, diplomatic alliances, and economic integration that would eventually create the Lydian kingdom. The rise of Lydian power proceeded through systematic expansion, incorporating former Arzawan territories into a new imperial structure fundamentally different from either Bronze Age kingdoms or fragmented Dark Age political arrangements. Lydian rulers developed administrative systems combining traditional Anatolian governance practices with innovations borrowed from contemporary Greek city-states and Near Eastern kingdoms, creating hybrid institutions, proving remarkably effective for managing diverse populations across extensive territories. Archaeological excavations at Lydian administrative centers reveal sophisticated bureaucratic facilities, standardized record-keeping systems, and specialized storage complexes supporting complex logistics required for governing an expanding territorial state. The Lydian approach to incorporating Arzawan-descended populations differed significantly from earlier Hittite imperial policies, emphasizing cultural accommodation and economic integration rather than political subordination and systematic resource extraction. Lydian administrators recognized scattered communities throughout western Anatolia possessed valuable agricultural, craft, and commercial capabilities that could contribute to royal prosperity if properly managed and incentivized. Rather than imposing uniform administrative structures, Lydian governance adapted to local conditions while establishing overarching frameworks for taxation, military service, and judicial proceedings, maintaining central authority without disrupting productive local arrangements. Archaeological evidence from settlement sites throughout the Hermus and Meander River valleys reveals significant changes in material culture during the early Lydian period, reflecting both political integration and cultural synthesis. Pottery assemblages show gradual adoption of Lydian decorative motifs and production techniques alongside continuation of traditional local styles, creating hybrid ceramic traditions combining elements from multiple cultural sources. Architectural remains demonstrate similar patterns of cultural mixing, with traditional Anatolian building techniques adapted to incorporate Lydian architectural elements and spatial arrangements reflecting new social and political relationships. The preservation and transformation of Luwian cultural traditions under Lydian rule created complex processes of cultural negotiation varying significantly across different communities and social groups. Elite families maintaining positions of local authority during the Dark Age period often embraced Lydian cultural practices as strategies for accessing new opportunities within the expanding kingdom, while preserving elements of traditional identity, distinguishing them from purely Lydian aristocratic families. Archaeological evidence from elite residential complexes shows adoption of Lydian luxury goods, architectural styles, and burial practices, alongside continued use of traditional religious symbols, artistic motifs, and ceremonial objects, maintaining connection to Arzawan heritage. Rural communities throughout former Arzawan territories experienced Lydian integration primarily through economic relationships, gradually transforming agricultural production, craft activities, and local exchange systems. Lydian administrators introduced new crops, farming techniques, and land tenure arrangements, increasing agricultural productivity while integrating rural communities into broader commercial networks centered on Lydian urban centers. Archaeological evidence from rural settlements shows gradual adoption of Lydian pottery styles, metal tools, and household equipment, alongside continued use of traditional implements and techniques, proving well adapted to local conditions. The development of Lydian military institutions incorporated traditional Anatolian warfare practices while introducing innovations borrowed from contemporary Greek and Near Eastern military systems. Archaeological evidence from military installations reveals construction of specialized training facilities, weapons workshops, and storage complexes supporting professional military forces equipped with standardized weapons and armor. Integration of former Arzawan military traditions into Lydian forces proceeded through recruitment programs attracting experienced warriors while providing training in new tactical doctrines and equipment systems, enhancing overall military capabilities. Lydian expansion along the Aegean coast brought the kingdom into direct contact with Greek colonial settlements established during preceding centuries at strategic harbors and river mouths throughout western Anatolia. These Greek communities, primarily founded by settlers from Ionia and Aeolus, had developed independent political institutions and cultural practices differing significantly from both traditional Anatolian arrangements and Lydian imperial systems. The resulting interactions created complex zones of cultural contact where Greek, Lydian, and indigenous Anatolian traditions intersected and influenced each other through commercial exchange, intermarriage, and political negotiation. The establishment of Greek colonies along the western Anatolian coast had proceeded gradually during the Dark Age and early Archaic periods as Greek communities sought new agricultural land, commercial opportunities, and strategic positions for maritime trade. Archaeological evidence from colonial sites like Phocaea, Smyrna, and Ephesus reveals systematic urban planning, sophisticated harbor installations, and specialized craft quarters demonstrating colonists' commitment to establishing permanent settlements rather than temporary trading posts. These communities maintained cultural connections to their mother cities while adapting to local geographical conditions and developing relationships with indigenous populations ranging from cooperative to hostile, depending on specific circumstances and competing interests. The interaction between Greek colonists and Arzawan-descended communities created opportunities for cultural exchange influencing both groups while generating new hybrid cultural forms combining elements from multiple traditions. Archaeological evidence from sites with mixed populations shows development of distinctive pottery styles, architectural techniques, and artistic motifs incorporating Greek decorative elements with traditional Anatolian forms and production methods. Religious practices also showed significant mixing, with Greek deities receiving worship alongside traditional Anatolian gods, while ceremonial practices combined elements from different ritual traditions. Lydian policies toward Greek colonial communities reflected sophisticated understanding of economic and political benefits that could be derived from cooperation rather than conquest. Rather than attempting to impose direct administrative control over well-fortified and economically valuable Greek cities, Lydian rulers developed tributary relationships preserving Greek political autonomy while ensuring Lydian access to maritime trade networks and specialized Greek products. Archaeological evidence from Lydian administrative centers includes Greek pottery, metalwork, and luxury goods, demonstrating extensive commercial relationships between the kingdom and coastal Greek communities. The transformation of ancient settlements into Greco-Lydian urban centers proceeded through complex processes of population mixing, architectural modification, and institutional adaptation, creating distinctive urban environments combining elements from multiple cultural traditions. Sites like Sardis underwent extensive urban renewal during this period, with new construction projects incorporating Greek architectural elements alongside traditional Lydian and Anatolian building techniques. Public spaces were redesigned to accommodate both traditional Lydian ceremonial activities and Greek-style civic gatherings, while residential areas showed increasing social stratification, reflecting complex ethnic and cultural hierarchies of mixed urban populations. The development of new urban foundations during the Lydian period reflected royal policies designed to consolidate territorial control while promoting economic development and cultural integration. Archaeological surveys identified numerous planned settlements established during this period at strategic locations controlling trade routes, agricultural regions, and mineral resources. These new cities featured standardized urban layouts, coordinated infrastructure systems, and specialized districts for different economic activities demonstrating sophisticated urban planning capabilities and substantial investment in territorial development. Commercial networks developing under Lydian rule connected Western Anatolian communities to trade systems spanning the Eastern Mediterranean and extending into the Black Sea region and Central Asia. Archaeological evidence reveals circulation of goods from diverse sources, including Greek pottery and metalwork, Phoenician luxury items, Central Asian textiles, and Egyptian decorative objects, demonstrating extensive reach of Lydian commercial relationships. The kingdom's position enabled it to serve as crucial intermediary between different cultural and economic zones while developing specialized industries producing goods for export to distant markets. The introduction of coinage under Lydian rule represented one of the most significant economic innovations of the ancient world and profoundly influenced commercial practices throughout Western Anatolia and beyond. Archaeological evidence from Lydian mints reveals sophisticated techniques for producing standardized gold and silver coins, facilitating commercial transactions while providing royal authorities with new mechanisms for controlling monetary systems and extracting resources from commercial activities. Adoption of coinage by Greek communities and other trading partners created integrated monetary systems, enhancing commercial efficiency while spreading Lydian political and cultural influence throughout the region. Religious developments during the Lydian period reflected complex processes of theological synthesis, combining traditional Anatolian spiritual practices with Greek religious concepts and Lydian royal ideologies. Temple complexes throughout the kingdom underwent extensive modifications, incorporating architectural elements and ceremonial arrangements from multiple cultural traditions, while maintaining connections to traditional sacred sites and ritual practices. The Great Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, though later rebuilt in purely Greek style, originated during this period as synthesis of Anatolian goddess worship, Greek religious architecture, and Lydian royal patronage, creating one of the most significant religious centers in the ancient world. Artistic developments during the Lydian period produced distinctive cultural achievements combining traditional Anatolian craft techniques with Greek aesthetic principles and Lydian royal patronage systems. Archaeological evidence from workshops and artistic centers reveals production of luxury goods, including decorated metalwork, carved gems, and elaborate textiles, incorporating motifs and techniques from multiple cultural sources. These artistic innovations influenced contemporary Greek art while preserving and transforming traditional Anatolian artistic traditions surviving from the Bronze Age through the Dark Age period. The development of literary and intellectual culture under Lydian rule created new opportunities for cultural expression and knowledge preservation, bringing together scholars, poets, and religious thinkers from diverse backgrounds. Archaeological evidence suggests existence of libraries, schools, and intellectual centers supporting preservation and transmission of traditional knowledge while encouraging innovation and cultural synthesis. Educational systems developing during this period reflected the kingdom's multicultural character and practical needs of governing diverse populations with different languages, customs, and legal traditions. Archaeological evidence from urban centers suggests existence of schools providing instruction in multiple languages, including Lydian, Greek, and Luwian, while teaching practical skills necessary for administrative, commercial, and craft activities. These educational institutions played crucial roles in creating shared cultural frameworks, enabling effective communication and cooperation between different ethnic and cultural groups within the kingdom. Legal systems under Lydian rule adapted traditional Anatolian legal practices to accommodate diverse populations and complex commercial relationships characterizing the expanding kingdom. Archaeological evidence includes legal documents written in multiple languages and scripts, demonstrating sophisticated approaches to resolving disputes between parties from different cultural backgrounds. These legal innovations influenced subsequent Greek and Persian legal developments while preserving important elements of traditional Anatolian jurisprudence, evolved over centuries of political and cultural change. The gradual Hellenization of cultural practices throughout Western Anatolia during the later Lydian period reflected increasing Greek influence operating through commercial relationships, intermarriage, and cultural prestige rather than political conquest. Archaeological evidence shows progressive adoption of Greek pottery styles, architectural elements, and artistic motifs by communities throughout former Arzawan territories, while traditional practices continued in modified forms, incorporating Greek elements. This cultural transformation proceeded at different rates in different locations, with coastal areas showing more rapid Hellenization than inland communities maintaining stronger connections to traditional practices. Military developments during the later Lydian period incorporated Greek tactical innovations and equipment while preserving traditional Anatolian military capabilities, proving effective in local geographical conditions. Archaeological evidence from military sites reveals adoption of Greek hoplite armor and weapons alongside continued use of traditional Anatolian cavalry tactics and siege techniques. The resulting military system combined best elements from multiple traditions while adapting to specific strategic challenges faced by a territorial kingdom needing to defend extensive frontiers against diverse enemies. But the greatest transformation was yet to come. The final siege of Sardis in 546 BC marked not merely the end of Lydian independence, but the beginning of profound transformation that would reshape Western Anatolia's cultural, administrative, and economic foundations for the next 2 centuries. Cyrus the Great's methodical conquest of Croesus's kingdom proceeded with calculated precision, characterizing Persian expansion throughout the Near East. Yet integration of former Arzawan territories into the Achaemenid Empire required administrative innovations acknowledging the region's complex ethnic composition, sophisticated urban centers, and established commercial networks connecting Anatolia to markets spanning from the Black Sea to the eastern Mediterranean. The Persian administrative apparatus emerging in western Anatolia represented careful synthesis of imperial standardization with regional accommodation, reflecting Achaemenid understanding of effective governance over diverse populations. Archaeological evidence from Sardis reveals extensive modifications to the former Lydian administrative complex, with new construction incorporating Persian architectural elements alongside preserved Lydian structures, continuing to serve governmental functions. The resulting administrative center featured audience halls designed according to Persian ceremonial protocols, record-keeping facilities adapted to Achaemenid bureaucratic procedures, and residential quarters for Persian officials maintaining appropriate status distinctions while facilitating interaction with local administrative personnel. The establishment of the Lydian satrapy under Tabalus, one of Cyrus's trusted commanders, initiated systematic reorganization of territorial administration, dividing the former kingdom into manageable districts while preserving local governance structures, proven effective during the Lydian period. Persian administrators recognized that complex urban hierarchies, rural administrative networks, and commercial relationships developing under Lydian rule represented valuable assets that could serve imperial interests if properly managed rather than disrupted through wholesale replacement. Archaeological surveys throughout the Hermus and Meander valleys reveal continued occupation of traditional administrative centers with evidence of gradual modification rather than abandonment and replacement that might have accompanied more disruptive conquest policies. The Persian approach to managing Greek cities along the Anatolian coast demonstrated sophisticated understanding of political and economic benefits derivable from maintaining established urban institutions while ensuring imperial control over strategic resources and military capabilities. Rather than imposing uniform administrative structures that might have provoked costly rebellions, Persian officials developed flexible arrangements preserving Greek civic institutions while establishing oversight mechanisms, preventing independent foreign policy initiatives or military preparations that might threaten imperial interests. Archaeological evidence from cities like Ephesus and Miletus shows continued Greek architectural projects and civic construction alongside establishment of Persian administrative facilities, monitoring local activities without disrupting productive urban functions. The transformation of religious practices under Persian rule, created complex processes of theological accommodation, reflecting Achaemenid policies of religious tolerance combined with imperial requirements for demonstrating loyalty to Persian authority. Traditional Anatolian religious sites throughout former Arzawan territories continued receiving worship and ritual offerings, but archaeological evidence reveals modifications to ceremonial practices incorporating acknowledgement of Persian royal authority and Zoroastrian religious concepts. Temple complexes underwent architectural modifications, adding Persian ceremonial spaces while preserving traditional sanctuary areas, creating religious environments serving both local spiritual needs and imperial political requirements. The Great Temple of Artemis at Ephesus exemplified complex religious negotiations, characterizing this period as Greek, Anatolian, and Persian religious traditions intersected within one of the ancient world's most significant sacred sites. Archaeological excavations reveal construction projects during the Persian period expanding temple facilities while incorporating architectural elements reflecting Persian royal patronage and Zoroastrian symbolic motifs. Votive deposits from this period include offerings combining traditional Greek and Anatolian religious objects with items reflecting Persian cultural influences, demonstrating complex religious synthesis emerging under imperial rule. The introduction of Zoroastrian religious concepts into Western Anatolian spiritual practices proceeded gradually through Persian administrative personnel, military garrisons, and commercial communities rather than through systematic missionary activities or forced conversion programs. Archaeological evidence from Persian residential quarters and administrative centers includes fire altars, ritual vessels, and ceremonial objects associated with Zoroastrian worship, demonstrating maintenance of Persian religious practices within multicultural urban environments. The influence of Zoroastrian theological concepts appears in modified local religious practices, incorporating dualistic spiritual concepts and ethical teachings while preserving traditional ceremonial forms and community religious functions. The Persian administrative system's emphasis on efficient resource extraction and territorial control required detailed knowledge of local economic capabilities, population distributions, and productive resources that could support imperial military operations and administrative expenses. Archaeological evidence from Persian administrative centers includes extensive record-keeping facilities with standardized storage systems for documents, tablets, and scrolls, recording taxation assessments, population censuses, and resource inventories throughout the satrapy. These administrative innovations created systematic information-gathering capabilities, enabling more effective governance while providing imperial authorities with detailed knowledge of regional conditions and capabilities. The development of new transportation infrastructure under Persian rule reflected imperial requirements for rapid communication and military movement across Western Anatolia's extensive territories, while supporting expanded commercial activities, generating revenue for imperial administration. Archaeological surveys identified substantial road construction projects improving existing routes while establishing new connections between administrative centers, military installations, and commercial hubs. The famous Royal Road connecting Sardis to the imperial capital at Persepolis required extensive engineering work through mountainous central Anatolian terrain, with evidence of bridges, way stations, and maintenance facilities supporting regular courier services and military movements. Commercial developments under Persian rule created unprecedented opportunities for long-distance trade, connecting Western Anatolian producers to markets throughout the vast Achaemenid Empire while introducing new products, techniques, and commercial practices, enhancing local economic capabilities. Archaeological evidence from commercial centers reveals expanded warehouse facilities, specialized craft quarters, and improved harbor installations, supporting increased trade volumes and more diverse commercial relationships. The Persian Empire's standardized coinage system facilitated commercial transactions across vast distances, while providing stable monetary standards, reducing transaction costs and commercial risks. The integration of traditional Anatolian craft production into imperial commercial networks created new markets for regional specialties while introducing Persian aesthetic preferences and technical innovations influencing local production methods. Archaeological evidence from craft workshops reveals continued production of traditional pottery, textiles, and metalwork alongside new products incorporating Persian decorative motifs and production techniques. Textile production, which had been significant economic activity throughout the region's history, expanded significantly under Persian rule as imperial demand for high-quality fabrics created profitable export opportunities for skilled local producers. Agricultural innovations introduced during the Persian period enhanced productivity, while adapting traditional farming practices to serve imperial administrative requirements and expanded commercial opportunities. Archaeological evidence from rural settlements reveals introduction of new irrigation techniques, crop varieties, and land management practices increasing yields while maintaining soil fertility over extended periods. Persian administrators promoted agricultural improvements supporting growing urban populations while generating surplus production for taxation and commercial export, contributing to imperial revenues and regional prosperity. The Persian military system's incorporation of local military traditions and personnel created hybrid forces combining imperial standardization with regional tactical knowledge and geographical expertise. Archaeological evidence from military installations reveals weapons workshops, training facilities, and garrison quarters supporting mixed units including Persian regulars, local auxiliaries, and specialized forces recruited from different ethnic communities within the satrapy. These military arrangements provided effective defense against external threats while maintaining internal security through forces understanding local conditions and possessing established relationships with regional populations. The gradual Persianization of elite culture throughout Western Anatolia proceeded through adoption of Persian court customs, artistic styles, and social practices, demonstrating loyalty to imperial authority while providing access to opportunities within the broader Persian administrative and commercial systems. Archaeological evidence from elite residential complexes reveals adoption of Persian architectural elements, decorative arts, and luxury goods alongside continued use of traditional local status symbols and cultural markers. These cultural adaptations created distinctive hybrid elite cultures, maintaining regional identity while participating effectively in imperial political and social networks. Educational developments under Persian rule created new opportunities for cultural and intellectual exchange, bringing together scholars, administrators, and religious thinkers from diverse backgrounds throughout the empire. Archaeological evidence suggests establishment of schools and intellectual centers, providing training in multiple languages, administrative techniques, and cultural traditions necessary for effective participation in imperial governance and commercial activities. These educational institutions played crucial roles in preserving traditional knowledge while facilitating cultural exchange and innovation, enriching both local and imperial intellectual traditions. Legal systems under Persian administration adapted traditional local legal practices to conform with imperial legal principles while preserving community-based dispute resolution mechanisms proven effective for managing local affairs. Archaeological evidence includes legal documents demonstrating sophisticated approaches to resolving disputes between parties from different cultural and legal traditions while maintaining consistency with imperial legal standards. These legal innovations created frameworks for managing complex multicultural societies while preserving valuable elements of traditional jurisprudence evolved over centuries of political development. Economic prosperity under Persian rule reached levels exceeding previous achievements during the Lydian period as imperial peace, standardized commercial practices, and access to vast markets created unprecedented opportunities for regional producers and merchants. Archaeological evidence reveals expanded urban centers, improved rural settlements, and sophisticated infrastructure projects supporting growing populations and increased economic activity. The combination of imperial stability, efficient administration, and cultural tolerance created conditions enabling traditional Anatolian communities to prosper while adapting to new political and economic circumstances. The Persian administrative system's success in Western Anatolia demonstrated effectiveness of imperial policies balancing central control with regional autonomy while promoting economic development and cultural accommodation. Archaeological evidence from the final decades of Persian rule reveals continued prosperity, cultural vitality, and political stability, providing foundations for subsequent historical developments while preserving essential elements of traditional Anatolian civilization evolved over more than a millennium of political and cultural change. Alexander the Great's crossing of the Hellespont in 334 BC marked the beginning of the final chapter in dissolution of distinct Arzawan cultural identity as Macedonian conquest brought new administrative systems, settlement patterns, and cultural influences, completing the transformation begun under Persian rule. The Battle of the Granicus, fought within ancient Arzawan territory's heartland, demonstrated military obsolescence of traditional Anatolian defensive strategies against Macedonian tactical innovations, while subsequent establishment of Hellenistic kingdoms throughout Western Anatolia created political frameworks systematically replacing remaining Persian-era accommodations for local cultural practices with standardized Greek institutional arrangements. Archaeological evidence from major centers like Sardis reveals extensive urban reconstruction projects initiated immediately following Alexander's conquest, with Macedonian engineers implementing grid-pattern street systems, standardized building codes, and centralized water distribution networks reflecting Greek urban planning principles rather than organic development patterns characterizing Anatolian cities for millennia. The systematic demolition of Persian administrative buildings and their replacement with Greek-style civic structures eliminated physical reminders of previous political arrangements while creating urban environments promoting Greek cultural practices and social organization. The establishment of veteran settlements throughout Western Anatolia under Alexander's successors accelerated cultural transformation through introduction of substantial Greek-speaking populations, receiving land grants in territories previously occupied by communities, maintaining Arzawan-descended cultural traditions. Archaeological surveys in the Hermus and Meander valleys reveal numerous new settlements founded during the early Hellenistic period with distinctly Greek material culture, architectural styles, and urban planning contrasting sharply with traditional Anatolian settlement patterns. These colonial foundations created Greek cultural enclaves, gradually expanding their influence over surrounding territories through intermarriage, commercial relationships, and administrative integration. The Seleucid administrative system emerging in Western Anatolia during the 3rd century BC implemented systematic Hellenization policies, eliminating remaining Persian-era accommodations for local cultural practices while promoting Greek educational institutions, religious observances, and legal procedures throughout the region. Archaeological evidence from administrative centers reveals replacement of multilingual record-keeping systems with standardized Greek documentation, conversion of traditional religious sites to Greek cult practices, and establishment of Greek-style gymnasia and theaters serving as centers for cultural assimilation rather than mere entertainment venues. The gradual disappearance of Luwian language use in public contexts during the Hellenistic period can be traced through epigraphic evidence showing progressive replacement of traditional Anatolian scripts and vocabulary with Greek equivalents in official documents, commercial contracts, and religious dedications. The latest securely dated Luwian inscriptions from Western Anatolia appear during the early 3rd century BC, suggesting the language survived in private contexts for several generations after elimination from public use. Archaeological evidence from rural settlements indicates traditional cultural practices persisted longer in isolated communities, but these enclaves gradually succumbed to economic and social pressures, favoring participation in Greek-dominated urban networks. The Roman conquest of Western Anatolia during the 2nd and 1st centuries BC completed political transformation begun under Hellenistic rule while introducing new administrative efficiency and cultural standardization, eliminating last vestiges of distinct regional identity. Roman provincial administration in Asia Minor implemented systematic census procedures, taxation systems, and legal frameworks, treating all inhabitants as subjects of a unified imperial system regardless of ethnic background or cultural heritage. Archaeological evidence from Roman administrative centers reveals construction of standardized governmental buildings, military installations, and infrastructure projects reflecting imperial architectural styles and functional requirements rather than local traditions or preferences. Roman urban planning projects transformed existing cities throughout Western Anatolia according to imperial standards emphasizing functionality, monumentality, and symbolic representation of Roman authority rather than accommodation of local cultural practices or historical continuity. The reconstruction of Ephesus during the early imperial period exemplifies this transformation, with massive construction projects creating a thoroughly Roman urban environment featuring standardized public buildings, residential districts organized according to social hierarchy, and commercial facilities designed to serve imperial economic interests. Archaeological excavations reveal these construction projects often involved deliberate destruction of earlier buildings that might have preserved connections to pre-Roman cultural traditions. The integration of Western Anatolian populations into Roman military service accelerated cultural assimilation through recruitment policies, removing young men from local communities for extended service periods in distant provinces where they acquired Roman cultural practices, Latin language skills, and loyalty to imperial institutions rather than regional traditions. Military diplomas and tombstone inscriptions from the imperial period document careers of numerous soldiers from Western Anatolian communities who served throughout the empire and often retired to veteran colonies far from their places of origin, breaking generational continuity that might have preserved traditional cultural knowledge. Despite systematic political and cultural transformation, elements of Arzawan heritage survived in modified forms influencing regional culture development throughout the Roman and Byzantine periods. Place names throughout Western Anatolia preserve linguistic elements derived from ancient Luwian vocabulary, with modern toponyms like Tralles, Nisa, and Magnesia, containing recognizable components of pre-Greek Anatolian languages, surviving centuries of linguistic change and political transformation. Systematic analysis of these toponymic survivals reveals patterns of linguistic continuity, providing valuable evidence for reconstructing ancient settlement patterns and cultural boundaries otherwise poorly documented in historical sources. Religious practices in rural Western Anatolian areas maintained connections to ancient Anatolian spiritual traditions through syncretistic processes incorporating traditional ceremonial elements into Greek and Roman religious frameworks. Archaeological evidence from sanctuary sites throughout the region reveals continuous ritual activity spanning from the Bronze Age through the Roman period, with votive offerings and ceremonial deposits demonstrating evolving but persistent religious practices adapted to changing political and cultural circumstances. The cult of the Anatolian mother goddess, though eventually identified with Greek Cybele and Roman Magna Mater, preserved essential elements of Bronze Age fertility religion central to Arzawan's spiritual life. The survival of traditional craft techniques in pottery production, metalworking, and textile manufacture created continuities in material culture connecting Roman period communities to their ancient heritage despite political and linguistic transformation. Archaeological analysis of pottery assemblages from rural settlements reveals production techniques, decorative motifs, and vessel forms maintaining recognizable connections to Bronze Age Anatolian traditions while adapting to changing functional requirements and aesthetic preferences. These craft continuities suggest practical knowledge and cultural skills passed through family networks and community traditions, preserving essential elements of ancient technical expertise across political transitions. Agricultural practices throughout Western Anatolia during the Roman period incorporated traditional Anatolian farming techniques alongside imperial innovations, creating hybrid systems, maximizing productivity while preserving knowledge of local environmental conditions and crop varieties developed over millennia of agricultural experimentation. Archaeological evidence from rural settlements reveals continued use of traditional irrigation methods, terracing systems, and crop rotation practices proven effective in local geographical conditions, while Roman agricultural writers like Columella acknowledged superiority of certain Anatolian farming techniques and recommended their adoption throughout the empire. The rediscovery of Arzawan civilization began during the 19th century as European archaeological expeditions to Anatolia encountered massive ruins, mysterious inscriptions, and distinctive artifact assemblages clearly predating Greek and Roman occupation, but unable to be attributed to any known historical civilization. Early excavations at sites like Sardis and Ephesus revealed construction techniques, architectural styles, and decorative arts, demonstrating sophisticated urban civilization during periods when ancient literary sources provided little information about Anatolian political and cultural development. These initial discoveries generated scholarly interest in exploring prehistoric and protohistoric periods of Anatolian civilization, overshadowed by focus on classical Greek and Roman achievements. The decipherment of Hittite cuneiform texts during the early 20th century provided first concrete historical evidence for Arzawa's existence as a major Bronze Age kingdom, with diplomatic correspondence and military records documenting extensive political relationships between Arzawan rulers and other major powers of the ancient Near East. The Amarna letters discovered in Egypt, containing correspondence between Arzawan kings and Egyptian pharaohs, demonstrated Arzawa had been recognized as an independent power capable of conducting international diplomacy on equal terms with the great empires of the Late Bronze Age. These textual discoveries transformed scholarly understanding of Bronze Age Anatolian political complexity, while providing historical context for archaeological discoveries throughout Western Anatolia. Systematic archaeological investigation of Bronze Age sites throughout Western Anatolia during the 20th century revealed Arzawan civilization's extent and sophistication through excavations at major centers like Besa Sultan, Aphrodisias, and Troy. These excavations uncovered palace complexes, administrative archives, fortification systems, and residential districts demonstrating urban planning capabilities, architectural sophistication, and material prosperity comparable to contemporary civilizations in Mesopotamia and Egypt. Discovery of extensive Bronze Age settlement networks throughout the Hermus and Meander valleys revealed Arzawan political control had extended across substantial territories with integrated administrative systems and coordinated defensive arrangements. The development of new archaeological techniques during the late 20th and early 21st centuries enabled more sophisticated analysis of Arzawan material culture and settlement patterns through methods like remote sensing, chemical analysis, and environmental reconstruction, providing detailed information about ancient economic activities, trade relationships, and environmental conditions. Satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar revealed extensive buried structures at known sites while identifying previously unknown settlements, expanding understanding of Arzawan territorial extent and population density. Chemical analysis of pottery, metals, and other artifacts provided evidence for trade networks, production techniques, and resource exploitation patterns, demonstrating complexity of Bronze Age Anatolian economic systems. Linguistic analysis of Luwian hieroglyphic inscriptions discovered throughout Anatolia and Syria provided crucial evidence for understanding Arzawan language, religious practices, and political institutions, supplementing archaeological evidence with direct testimony from ancient sources. The gradual decipherment of Luwian hieroglyphic texts revealed this writing system had been used throughout much of Anatolia during the Late Bronze Age and Early Iron Age, with inscriptions documenting royal genealogies, religious ceremonies, and administrative procedures providing insights into Arzawan political and cultural organization. These linguistic discoveries demonstrated widespread influence of Luwian-speaking peoples throughout Anatolia, while revealing connections between different regional kingdoms sharing cultural and political traditions. Contemporary scholarly debates about Arzawan civilization focus on fundamental questions about political organization, cultural identity, and historical significance, reflecting broader discussions about Bronze Age state formation, cultural interaction, and imperial expansion in the ancient Near East. Some scholars emphasize Arzawan political independence and cultural distinctiveness, arguing the kingdom represented a unique Anatolian political tradition differing significantly from contemporary Near Eastern imperial systems. Others stress cultural connections and political relationships, linking Arzawa to broader patterns of Bronze Age development throughout the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East. The relationship between Arzawan political institutions and broader patterns of Bronze Age state formation remains a subject of active scholarly investigation, with ongoing debates about the extent to which Arzawan governmental systems reflected indigenous Anatolian political traditions versus adaptation of administrative techniques borrowed from Mesopotamian and Egyptian sources. Archaeological evidence for specialized administrative buildings, record-keeping systems, and bureaucratic procedures suggests sophisticated governmental capabilities. But specific organizational principles and institutional arrangements governing Arzawan political life remain poorly understood due to limited textual evidence and fragmentary nature of administrative archives. Questions about Arzawan cultural identity and ethnic composition reflect broader scholarly discussions about the nature of Bronze Age political entities and the relationship between political organization and cultural identity in ancient societies. The extent to which Arzawan political unity reflected shared ethnic identity, cultural traditions, and linguistic practices remains uncertain, with archaeological evidence suggesting considerable cultural diversity within territories, acknowledging Arzawan political authority. These debates have important implications for understanding ancient concepts of political legitimacy, territorial control, and cultural integration in complex Bronze Age societies. The significance of Arzawan civilization for understanding Bronze Age Anatolian history and Indo-European cultural development continues generating scholarly interest and debate as new archaeological discoveries and analytical techniques provide additional evidence for evaluating competing interpretations of ancient Anatolian political and cultural development. Recent excavations at sites throughout western Anatolia revealed evidence for sophisticated urban planning, advanced metallurgical techniques, and extensive trade networks demonstrating complexity and prosperity of Bronze Age Anatolian civilization. These discoveries have important implications for understanding broader historical context of Indo-European expansion, development of complex societies in Anatolia, and cultural interactions shaping ancient Near Eastern civilization. The legacy of Arzawan civilization extends beyond its immediate historical significance to encompass broader questions about cultural continuity, political transformation, and preservation of historical memory across extended periods of political change and cultural adaptation. The survival of Arzawan cultural elements through successive periods of foreign rule demonstrates resilience of local traditions and complex processes through which cultural knowledge is preserved, modified, and transmitted across generations. These patterns of cultural continuity and transformation provide valuable insights into relationships between political power and cultural identity, remaining relevant for understanding historical processes in many different contexts. Modern archaeological research continues revealing new aspects of Arzawan civilization, while contributing to broader understanding of Bronze Age Anatolian history and its significance for world history. The Kingdom of Arzawa represents one of the most important examples of Bronze Age political and cultural development outside traditional centers of ancient Near Eastern civilization, demonstrating that sophisticated urban societies, complex political institutions, and advanced cultural achievements developed independently in diverse geographical and cultural contexts throughout the ancient world. The rediscovery and ongoing investigation of Arzawan civilization continues enriching our understanding of ancient history, while providing valuable perspectives on diversity and complexity of human cultural achievement in the Bronze Age world. As we close this chapter on Arzawa, remember, this wasn't just another forgotten kingdom. For over 1,000 years, Arzawa stood as one of the Bronze Age world's great powers, corresponding with pharaohs, challenging empires, creating art that rivaled anything produced in Mesopotamia or Egypt. Its people spoke a language preserving ancient Indo-European traditions, practiced crafts of breathtaking sophistication, and developed political institutions balancing centralized authority with local autonomy. The tragedy isn't merely that Arzawa fell. All kingdoms eventually fall. The tragedy is how completely it was forgotten. For over 3,000 years, one of antiquity's most powerful civilizations vanished so thoroughly that even its name disappeared from human memory. Only in the last century have we begun recovering this lost world, piecing together from fragmentary inscriptions and buried ruins the story of a people who once dominated Western Anatolia. Their legacy survives in ways they never imagined. In the place names dotting modern Turkey, in craft traditions passed down through countless generations, in religious practices adapted and transformed, but never entirely abandoned. The Luwian language they spoke influenced the development of other Anatolian languages. Their artistic traditions shaped Greek art. Their commercial networks established trade routes used for millennia. So when you visit the magnificent ruins of Ephesus or walk through the ancient streets of Sardis, remember, you're walking through layers of history stretching back not just to Greek and Roman times, but to the Bronze Age kingdom of Arzawa, a civilization that ruled these lands when Troy was young, when the Hittites were just beginning their rise to power, when the pyramids of Egypt were already ancient monuments. Their story reminds us that even the mightiest civilizations can be forgotten, that cultural memory is fragile, and that the past constantly surprises us with new revelations about humanity's incredible achievements. Thanks for joining us on this journey through Arzawa's extraordinary history. Sweet dreams, and may you dream of Bronze Age kingdoms and forgotten glories. Subscribe to Flow of History for more amazing historical content. And remember, the past is never truly lost, just waiting to be rediscovered.